We're jumping into a spring road trip around southeastern inland Australia. What a great feeling! Wonderful country towns to enjoy and exciting birds that we seldom or never see on our home patch could be waiting somewhere out there. But our first stop is a supermarket car park only 40 k's north. We've had a tip that the rarest of the 3 broad-winged kites in Australia, square-tailed kite, is nesting here above the Gawler River. The kite's flown in on long broad wings, loudly hassled by noisy miners. It's a solitary bird that comes south to breed in summer, and we're delighted with these views. The whitish head is a defining feature. Great start to the trip. Then it's off up the Barrier Highway to Broken Hill, an historic mining town just over the New South Wales border with many lovely old buildings. Before we head off next morning to Cobar, we go up the road some way towards Mutwinji National Park, searching for Major Mitchell's Akka pink cockatoo. And there they are. Look at that gorgeous crest. They're foraging on the side of the road for various seeds, and particularly paddy melons, which they love. A glorious cockatoo of Australia's arid regions. We stop for lunch at Wilcannia on the Darling River and encounter our first apostle birds, always found in noisy gregarious groups, though not always 12. They even cooperate in nest building and feeding young. Over the Darling River. Then an all too common sight, a scattering cloud of black rising up from a carcass, ravens, whistling kites and black kites. The roadkill is mainly kangaroos, which are vulnerable, feeding at dawn and dusk, and these scavengers are always waiting to clean up. We arrive at Cobar just in time to make it to the lake at Newley Reserve and are thrilled to find plum-headed finch sitting up in the reeds as we walk in. It's one of our main target birds. Birding is very rarely this easy. We never see these delightful, quiet little birds in South Australia, and finches are my favourite family. A very enjoyable sighting. We can hear that there are plenty of other species here too. Here's the noisiest. The edge of this lake is a lovely birding spot in the early evening. Next morning, it's another long drive to Cunnamulla via Bourke. Feral goats have been grazing along the sides of the roads since we were north of Yunta back in South Australia. They're a huge pest in these arid regions. Seeing pink cockatoos, we stop and notice a dam on the other side of the road, which is supporting smaller birds as well as the cockies. And the inevitable goats. Bourke is a lovely old town on the Darling River, which once was the farthest point for the paddle steamers from the Moree mouth in South Australia. But we're heading north into Queensland and Cunnamulla over the flat, dry plains. And in the main street, sitting on his swag, is a double life-size statue of an iconic figure, the Cunnamulla fella from the Slim Dusty song, a tribute to the stockmen and roustabouts of the Australian outback. The town itself is on the Warrego River. Cunnamulla bushlands is an arid land botanic gardens and a great spot for birds because of the access to water. A spotted bowerbird has built his avenue bower close to the track. He favours green and white objects to decorate it. The whole edifice is purely to lure in a female for mating. After that, she goes off, builds the nest and feeds the chicks on her own, while he continues to make his bower as attractive as possible for further mating opportunities. He's clearly not pleased to have us around while he's courting. Unsurprisingly, we South Aussies call this familiar, widespread species a mudlark. Ground-feeding red rumps are members of a small group of grass seed and blossom-eating parrots. Zebra finches are widespread and abundant over large, dry areas of Australia, but always near a water source. The males have orange cheek patches, white barring on the throat, and white spotted rufous flanks, while the females are much plainer. As dusk falls, brown quails appear, and a pair of brilliantly coloured ringneck parrots come down to drink. There are 4 subspecies of ringnecks which sometimes interbreed. These look most like mallee ringnecks. Next morning we're up before dawn to visit Yulo Bor, 50 kilometres west, looking for birds attracted to the scarce water sword fed by an artesian bore in the middle of a vast, hot, dry area. But the sun has risen just before we arrive. Oops, should have set the alarm earlier. Nevertheless, this is still the only water available for a long way round, and birds are here. Budgies are in for an early morning drink. And a noisy pink cockatoo. The male emu brings in his stripy chicks. White-necked herons use shallow, often transient freshwater sources all over Australia. Feeding at the edges is the equally widespread black-fronted dotterel. An opportunity for some quick procreation. Galahs are familiar to most Australians, noisy, playful, and also very beautiful in the morning light. The most widespread of Australian kingfishers. The gidgee and mulga trees surrounding the dam provide shade and nesting places. Brown tree creepers often feed on the ground. The male is in his dazzling breeding plumage. This inland species is one of the 9 Australian species in the delightful fairy wren family. They're mainly ground feeders and travel in pairs or small flocks. It's spring, so there's a lot of bird song about. As we leave, one of the most devoted bird dads passes by again with his brood. 55 days on the nest without leaving or any input from the female, and then caring for them for the next 4 months. We drive to Bowra Wildlife Sanctuary, but it had just closed for the season. Fortunately, we'd visited previously and discovered what a great place it was. We're always thrilled to find a quail thrush, usually slowly and deliberately meandering along probing for insects in the leaf litter. 6 of the 7 Australian quail thrush prefer semi to very arid environments. We were very lucky to watch a pair of ground cuckoo shrike nest building. The largest and most terrestrial of the 4 cuckoo shrikes, they run feeding and hopping over open woodland and shrubland with little cover. They're widespread but uncommon in the more arid parts of Australia, and of the 4 cuckoo shrike species here, this species is the only endemic. The ever-active restless flycatcher is even more frenetic than usual with this brood to feed. A parasitic brood cuckoo, the Horsfield's bronze, mainly parasitizes fairy wrens and thornbills. In contrast, the red-capped robin pair are busy building a beautifully crafted cobweb-lined nest. We're always happy to see a black honeyeater, since although widespread, they're highly nomadic in search of the blooming Eremophila plants they love. Hall's babbler, the one babbler of the 4 species we hadn't seen until this one at Bowra. We love this chatty, active, bouncing family of ground-feeding birds. There were also grey-crowned and chestnut-crowned babblers present, a feast of babblers. Then a rare treat. We watched gentle little Burke's parrots feeding quietly on the ground in front of us. Our only previous sightings had been dim, distant dawn views at waterholes. What a marvellous place Bowra is. With Bowra closed, we had time to call in for an evening visit to Cunnamulla bushlands, where I staked out a puddle. Bluebonnet is another parrot that prefers to drink morning and evening and loaf in trees during the heat of the day, and this group is enjoying frequent drinking and bathing. This long brown snake disappeared into the bush next to the puddle. I couldn't help wondering when it would reappear. But in the meantime, the previously stroppy spotted bowerbird very much enjoyed his bath. I was pleased to have this view of fairy martins with their diagnostic rufous crown, which was easy to see when they were collecting mud for their nests. Very helpful for ID, as there are plenty of other swallows around. Meanwhile, Greg had set himself up across the road by a large waterhole where cockatoos were swirling about. I was able to assure him that those small birds flying above were definitely fairy martins. It was a surprise to see a sole-banded lapwing, a species more usually seen in flocks on dry, hot plains. This was certainly the favourite watering hole for cockatoos, common across much of inland Australia, but always near water. The males have the bright yellow cheek patch and crest. It's a joy to watch the swift, strong flight of these graceful, slender birds as they come in for their evening drink. The briefest of sips before swerving off again as they gather to roost for the night. Early next morning, before leaving Cunnamulla, we check out the weir. Throughout this trip, we were surprised by very frequent sightings of restless flycatcher. They're far outnumbered by woolly wagtails in South Australia, which is in the south of their range. Rufous songlarks were also everywhere. We're turning east to Goondiwindi, and first stop is Bolan on the banks of Wallam Creek. There are excellent facilities and a pathway along the creek where we walk. A boldly coloured red-winged parrot is feeding quietly in the tree canopy, but unfortunately there's sudden thunder and we have to dash back in the rain. We have lunch at St George on the Ballon River. A butcher bird and a typical power line sighting of oriental dollar bird, a member of the roller family, which is a summer breeding migrant to Australia. Sadly, always more roadkill as we drive on to Goondiwindi, another impressively grand country hotel. Early next morning, we're checking out the Goondiwindi Botanical Gardens, and Greg has spotted pale-headed rosella. It ranges from Cape York down to northern New South Wales, and like other rosellas, it nests in tree hollows. Little friarbird is the smallest and most widespread of the friarbirds, which are a genus of large honeyeaters. Then we have a wonderful surprise. Feeding among the reeds are several plum-headed finches, our second sighting of this very wanted species, and we're lapping it up. The female has a plum-coloured patch on her forehead, while on the male the colour is deeper and also occurs under his chin. When he moves to a green bush, this becomes even more striking. Next, we're off farther east to Inglewood. We drive through the attractive main street to have lunch by Lake Cunnamulla, where we're surrounded by the ever-attentive picnic spot species, opossum birds, noisy miners, and butcher birds. Plus another large honeyeater, the blue-faced. Quietly doing their own thing nearby, feeding on blossom, is a small group of red-rumped parrots. Also Australian magpies. The black-backed race. In South Australia we usually see the white-backed race. We've been told nearby unsealed Mosquito Creek Road is a good birding spot, so we drive down. Unfortunately, a powerful wind is whipping up the dust. We do spot a small goanna. There's also a well-camouflaged snake-necked turtle in the roadside ditch. But the birds are hunkered down in shelter and we have to retreat from the dust storm. Next morning we head to Durikai State Forest on the western slopes of the Great Dividing Range. There are a couple of waterholes in this dry area which are very attractive to wildlife. A brilliantly coloured male Australian king parrot is in early for a drink. It's the only Australian parrot with a completely scarlet head. The female's chest and head are green. A whistler. Then another firebird species, noisy firebird. And one of our two oriole species, olive-backed, which is very widespread around the north and east coast. We're having a great time. Restless flycatcher again. This individual hardly stopped calling all day. Its noisy competition is another very familiar flycatcher, Willy Wagtail. A feisty little bird, never afraid to persistently annoy far larger birds. Looking from above instead of gazing up at tree martin is great for noting its shiny black head for ID. White-bellied cuckoo shrike, smaller and less widespread than black-faced. An attractive common little robin right down the east coast south of Cape York. These shallow edges are honeyeater heaven where they can safely bathe and drink. We saw 10 of the 78 species of this, the largest Australian bird family. The elegant, glossy male white-winged triller, hardly nomadic around the Australian mainland, but breeding summer migrant only in the south. The female is brown. Water is a precious resource. A large honeyeater of dry, non-tropical woodlands across Australia. Fuscus, well named for its plainness. A pair of leaden flycatchers were bathing. And for once, the female was the more colourful. A pair of white-throated tree creepers. The male has a plain white throat. More of the huge honeyeater family. All these species prefer this inland arid forest and woodland habitat. The noisy firebird is one of the more aggressive. The handsome striped honeyeater eats insects, seeds and fruit as well as nectar. A beautifully melodious song from one of our best and most widespread songbirds. A walk around the track to stretch our legs produces this endearing little ground feeder, which is quiet and well camouflaged until disturbed when it flies up. As evening falls, whip-tailed wallabies come in to drink. It's time to head home. But birds keep appearing. Another beautiful songster. Then 2 yellow-rumped thornbills which keep us watching. We have to drive home as the sun is setting, very carefully in case of wallabies on the road. We're heading south today for the Warrambungles, but first a detour to see if we can find little lorikeets, Australia's smallest parrot, now classed as vulnerable, which we had seen previously at Springdale Road. This is a tranquil country avenue of gums between lush farmland, with small creeks running across it. There are birds, flocks of white-browed swallows, and a male hooded robin, but no little lorikeets. They're fast flyers and notoriously nomadic, so we had to make do this time with memories. It's a long drive south, and we stop at a park in Moree for lunch. Greg had picked out a different call among the flock of rainbow lorikeets. There was a lone scaly-breasted lorikeet, a bird that does like parks and gardens. Greg was pretty pleased with himself. There were nesting birds everywhere, and a surprisingly vicious fight among the rosellas. This results in more than just a few ruffled feathers. We drive west through the town of Cunnamulla to our motel near the Warrumbungle National Park. The rock formations, remnants of ancient volcanic activity, are breathtaking, but we have another target bird in mind, turquoise parrot. And amazingly, it doesn't take us very long to spot a couple browsing near a waterhole. So tiny compared to the rosella, it's a popular watering spot. We're eager for closer views of this stunningly beautiful little near-femur parrot, so we drive out and to explore a track along the Castlereagh River, whose headwaters rise in the Warrumbungle Mountains. There it is. It's a male with a red wing flash. Like all 6 near-femurs, turquoise parrot is predominantly a ground feeder, usually close to surface water, and flies up to perch when disturbed. As this is an East Coast species, we've had very little chance to spend much time with this exquisite little bird. Its colours are breathtaking. We're waiting for it to fly down and resume quietly feeding on the grasses and seeds near the water, noticing that it prefers to keep in shade and under cover. Then it's time to recover from the excitement with lunch. But even there we're surrounded by wildlife, grey-crowned babblers, and a noisy flock of white-winged choughs, which keep us entertained. One juvenile is giving its parent a hard time. Back at the very birdy accommodation, there's a flock of double-barred finches feeding on the extensive lawns, and yellow-rumped thornbills gathering nesting material. The river flows through the grounds, and Greg is watching the smaller birds coming for an evening drink. This is the way to appreciate the full jewel-like beauty of the tiny spotted pardalote, which is usually high in the branches of a eucalypt feeding on lerp. The smallest of the wood swallows certainly has the bluest beak. This is a female white-throated tree creeper. Unlike the plainer male, she has a rufous spot below the ear coverts. The larger birds stay in the trees above. Sulphur-crested cockatoo, with surely the most raucous call of any Australian bird. one of the redder forms of crimson rosella. We're reluctant to leave this brilliant birding area, but Australia is a big country and we have to start driving south to overnight in Forbes and then in Griffith on our way to Chiltern in Victoria. Forbes has a large wildlife refuge round a lake. And a big thing. We love big things in Australia, but some are better than others, and the big goanna looks good in its woodland setting. Even better are the bird hides around the lake, especially when a flock of glossy ibis flies in. The eastern rosella is enjoying the rain, which has started, but we prefer an early night with another long drive coming up. Next day, we stop at the tiny town of Bowra and have lunch beside one of the more meaningful and tasteful big things, the big tennis racket, proudly marking the hometown of Warrambungles. As usual, we spot another bird, striated pardalote, slightly larger than the spotted pardalote. Around Lake Wangan, near Griffith, we see mistletoe bird and a whistling kite on its nest. In the motel garden is a well-hidden blue-faced honeyeater on its nest. Before dawn the next morning, we drive into Binya State Forest for some more waterhole birding. It's very, very hot and dry. A brilliantly coloured male mulga parrot. And here's the much duller female. It's usual to spot these parrots in pairs, like their close relations, red-rump parrots, but mulgars prefer dry woodlands and semi-arid areas. When feeding side by side with a common bronzewing, there is a marked size difference that the brilliant colouring tends to minimise at other times. This extremely thirsty wallaby drank for over 12 minutes. We move on to a picnic area near a water source and see the fourth of the Australian babbler species, white-browed babbler. Another good view of the large striped honeyeater. A handsomely marked male rufous whistler, a widespread bird, although a summer breeding migrant in the southeast. Next morning we head for Victoria, but we're going via Leeton in the Riverina to try for another special parrot, the superb. It's spring, the blossom's out, and so are the parrots. This is a male with golden forehead and throat. The female has a green head. Much larger than the neophemas, this is a long, slender parrot which needs large hollows in old trees to nest. These are becoming scarce, and this truly superb parrot is now vulnerable. It's a long, flat drive into Victoria, and rest stops are useful. An ever-watchful butcher bird has claimed this pullover. At last we're crossing the Moree River and entering Victoria, heading for Rutherglen. Uh-oh, another big thing. We'll give this one full marks for having been built in 1900 to hold the town's water supply. The mesh top section was added in 1969 to celebrate the town's winemaking culture. There's a lake at our accommodation, so it's time for water birds. The usual suspects. Apart from this surprise, Latham's snipe, a regular summer migrant from Japan. As usual, it's staying out of sight as much as possible. Next day, we drive to nearby Chiltern with high hopes for turquoise parrots. The town prides itself on welcoming birders, and in winter the box ironbark forest attracts the migratory threatened swift parrot. We head out to Bartley's Block. This confiding and familiar little flycatcher is always a welcome sight. And here's another busy chattering family of white-browed babblers. The unmistakable call of the gregarious black-chinned honeyeater, which feeds in upper levels of open eucalypt forests and woodlands dominated by box and ironbark eucalypts. We drive on through more of this habitat to Greenhill Dam. More honeyeaters. And one of our favourite birds, eastern shrike-tit. This attractive, sturdy little bird can be detected by quietly looking up into eucalypts where it's tearing off the bark to feed on insects and spiders. The dam is also hosting a pair of sacred kingfishers, which certainly make their presence felt. Unlike swift parrots, these are summer migrants. Another Durikai species, white-throated Durikai. Still pursuing parrots, we decide to try the fuller dams where there is a promising coverage of seeding grasses. And we're delighted to find a pair of Turks looking for a nesting hollow. These little parrots nest low to the ground, and the female is giving this site careful scrutiny, while the male is looking excited at the prospect. Plenty of head bobbing, and a thorough inspection of the area. This is the extended observation we had wanted. Fantastic. The plentiful mistletoe reminds us of the one target we haven't seen this time, the beautiful painted honeyeater. We'd had previous success near here, but this species is now classified as vulnerable, and this dry year, combined with degradation or loss of habitat and aggressive competition from noisy and yellow-throated miners, hasn't helped. It's raining next morning as we pack up and head northwest back into New South Wales. We're admiring the fast pace and effortless ease of our best-known marsupial. We call into Deniloquent Island Sanctuary and find a pair of equally iconic laughing kookaburras, while hearing a different call. It's the yellow race of Crimson Rosella. Typical Rosella tail wagging. And sharing this riverine redgum habitat, we catch up again with superb parrot. A colder morning at Swan Hill, then home to South Australia. 5,500 kilometres travelling through lovely old country towns and contrasting landscapes lit up by an exciting variety of birding experience in just one small area of our vast country.